you. Gentlemen, please join me. We're going to do something completely different in terms of topic now. We're going to talk about satellites, something near and dear to our heart. As a satellite consulting company, it's something that we follow a bit, but first I want to introduce my two esteemed speakers to my right. First, Mr. Bob Brumley, CEO of LaserLight, because we have a different title here, but it's definitely CEO. And to my further right, Mr. Mark Rigolle, CEO of LeoSat. As you're probably aware, I think Bob has spoken here before, introduced LaserLight a few years ago here, and it's an this new era of satellite communications, which is, I guess, so central to the Pacific region. Now we're talking about constellations, and for those that are new, and I see quite a number of new faces that maybe they don't know about who you are, can you give just the 60-second sort of elevator pitch to the audience, who you are, what problem you're solving, and then we'll get into the meat, as they say.
Shall I go first?
Mark, why don't you go first?
Okay, LeoSat is building a optical backbone in space, which runs over a constellation of satellites in polar orbit. The idea is, and that's one of the differences with Bob's constellation, the idea is that you plug into that network with Ka spot beams, and then wherever your signal needs to go, say from Singapore to San Francisco, it'll hop across our network over inter-satellite links, which are optical. So each of the satellites in our 6 polar planes is interconnected north, south, and east and west with the adjacent satellites, and that's how you get the mesh network in space. We're doing this because there are large pockets of demand that require a solution that doesn't exist today. If you talk to CISOs, data network managers, and so on, they're all looking for a solution to get huge amounts of data from one site of their company to another site. Telecom backhauling is another application, government applications. Anything that requires very large amounts of data to travel very quickly anywhere around the planet. That's what we do.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Bob.
LaserLight, we intend to build and deploy a constellation of medium Earth orbit satellites, 8 to 12. These satellites will be fully interconnected to an extended ground network, which we're also building. They, in turn, would take the traffic from what that point of connection would be, either to a ground node, where the satellite would connect directly to it, or else it would go to a fiber element, which would take it directly to the ground node. It's the service links, analogous in the terrestrial sector to your off-ramps or your last mile service links, are 100 gig. The inter-satellite links are 200 gig to avoid any kind of congestion on the satellites themselves. And the system is operated by a patented advanced software system, which essentially will route the traffic based on best latency, lowest latency, and best route as a method to avoid weather interference or atmospheric interference. The full system is meshed, and on the ground, it is essentially will be an end-to-end software-defined network. And the satellites themselves are basically COTS satellites with next-generation laser heads, which have been designed and built for us by Baugh Aerospace.
Okay, great. So just to jump in here, because we don't have a ton of time, I want to get right into the discussion. If you follow the satellite market or your buying capacity, you know two things. One, supply is way up, and availability of supply, and prices have come way down. So for the outsider looking in, you're bringing terabits of capacity to this market. The value proposition, if you see that all of this capacity, this is a different capacity, it's low latency, it's a different sort of market. What message, I guess, to the broader space satellite community when you say, okay, I'm bringing an order of magnitude, and you're just two of others. There's OneWeb, there's SpaceX, there's others that are planning or funding satellites. So yeah. It brings into question, is this new demand? Where is this demand in the Pacific, specifically?
Yeah, for me it's kind of deja vu, because I used to be at O3B at one point, and we were raising the funding, and everybody used to ask me exactly that question, who the hell needs all this incremental capacity? And the standard answer was, it's going to address new markets, and it's going to power applications that until now weren't possible in places where it wasn't possible. So we're going to extend the market, and I think history has proven that true. And so it's déjà vu because I'm saying the same thing again. LeoSat is going to enable CISOs, data network managers, to do stuff that today they cannot do or they do in a suboptimal way. So we're going to broadly expand the market and enable things to happen that until now were simply not possible. So not cannibalizing very much here. If we take away market share from anyone, it will be from maybe the big cable guys. But given the fact that we have a lot of capacity in satellite terms, but compared to a cable, submarine cable system, obviously it's only a trickle. The amount of cannibalization there will be negligible.
Okay. New demand, cannibalization, what will you be serving here in the region? Where is the demand?
On the demand side, we look at the same demand as a lot of our colleagues here who are in either the undersea cable business or the long-haul wholesale business. And that is, Cisco projects that there'll be 2 zettabytes of capacity by 2020. If that, in fact, it holds true, there is a larger and larger pie that is stressing the existing infrastructure. That is, you can see that we've been in an undersea cable boom for the last 18 to 24 months. There's an anticipation that won't slow down anytime soon. We talk about the different effects. The effect that we bring is we're going to deliver the same product as undersea, the same product as terrestrial, the same service level agreements as terrestrial. And so for the first time, because of the capacity capability and the service link capability of the system, we can compete with undersea cable and we can compete with fiber. And so there's a fourth element here that we bring to the table, and that's disruption. We're in a convergence period now in both terrestrial as well as in satellite with the introduction of SDN, high demand, and a lot of resource that needs to be applied to it, declining margins, a lot of competition on the long-haul pricing. This industry is ripe for disruption, and our system at least intends on being part of that process.
So if you count the number of constellations that are proposed, you're 2 of maybe half a dozen, maybe more. There actually, FCC filing period recently saw a number of very interesting ones that came about, SpaceX and some others. Is there enough in the market to support all of you, or are we sort of have to pick winners and losers down the road? I mean, it's still funding gates and technology, regulatory to get through, but is this, and again, what does that mean if you've made an investment in existing infrastructure, if you bought O3b, a tracking to dual tracking, what does that mean for the market, I guess, here in the Pacific? I'm speaking to if you're, a telco, a small user. So What do you think?
Well, in our particular case, I think anyone who is a mildly happy to very happy O3b customer, or who still has needs that O3b can't fulfill, they should talk to us because I call LeoSat O3b on steroids. We're truly global. We have more capacity per beam and per satellite. We bring stuff from rooftop to rooftop, so we're not just bent pipe. If you want to go from Hawaii and interconnect with a data center in London, we take you there in one hop. It's high security because there's no handoff. It goes physically from, as I say, from rooftop to rooftop, so there's no interconnection points, no one who can intercept the signal. And so all those things lead to a product that is very specific and tailored to needs in certain markets. So for that, I think there clearly is a market, and we've done the analysis. Mm-hmm. Many other people seem to be going after the desire to connect the unconnected, which directly to home residences, which I don't necessarily think is the best way to connect many places. I mean, let telcos do the last mile, let telcos build their networks, and we'll do the backhaul. We'll interconnect those. I think there maybe are slightly too many people going after the holy grail or the perceived holy grail of getting into people's homes directly, direct-to-home model for residential broadband via satellite. It can be done, but I would agree with certain people who say there's maybe too many people running after that one.
Okay, so there is room behind. Bob, do you agree?
I agree. I think when you evaluate these satellite constellations, you need to work backwards from the customer they intend to serve. What's the business case balanced on? If it is closing a gap on internet connectivity in unconnected locations, there are a variety of options for that now. I was once told by the FCC that there were 40 million households in the United States that didn't have interconnectivity. They didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have internet connectivity at a price they wanted to pay. And to a certain degree, there are other impediments to connectivity other than just a physical asset. But if you look at these satellite constellations, you start with who are the customers they're trying to serve? And then how are they plan on serving them? And how does that strike out relative to existing ISPs or those who will extend networks or whatever to take that market once you've developed it? And then you move back, and their whole business case is balanced on that. So I think looking at any of the new LEOs, for example, or maybe even some of the new GEOs that are being discussed, you need to look at where that customer is. And then the finite point would be is customer agreements. Your next question is going to be about financing, because it always is.
No.
But you're not going to finance these things unless you've got some tangible ability to either pay the debt back or pay your shareholders back. And the model is really going to be dependent on pre-subscription agreements or some indication that there are customers who want the service. Can't do it and build it and hope they come.
See, that's maybe not for both of you, but when I hear a lot, we're developing constellations, these 10-year bets or 10-plus-year bets for markets that just don't exist yet. That, for me, my core as an economist, that scares me greatly. But that's one of these applications where you know there's going to be demand. We see the Cisco curves. It's always going to go up, and we know they're always going to, which technically is true, but to what level and via what means. Mm-hmm. But I want to get to the ground, and I hate to say this if you're a satellite engineer, cover your ears, but the satellite part's almost the easy part in some ways as it relates to enabling a full solution. Mm-hmm. Building a satellite, putting inter-satellite links, those types of things. That technology exists or it is coming, and the roadmap is clear. But I point to the bottleneck on the ground, which is what does that terminal look like? Because this isn't just a parabolic dish fixed in the sky. You need new technology, new models, and where are we in the business or in the sort of development cycle? It's going to affect OneWeb. It's going to affect you guys, yep, as it relates to the ground segment.
Well, in our case, there's something old and something new. The something old is that any tracking antenna, XY tracking antenna, can connect to our system. In terms of modem, there's a further upgrade in terms of throughput that is required, but that's not a huge upgrade that needs to be done, and various vendors have told us that they're already working on this anyway. So that's infinitely possible, and that's what our business case is built on. We do see a very nice upside if and when, or as soon as I should say, these phased array promises really become a tangible product. I'm told, I'm not an engineer, I'm told in KA it's slightly more difficult than in KU. But we're talking to a few vendors, Phaser is one of them, who seem to be on the right track to get a product to market roughly around the time frame that we'll be launching. And as I say, our business case is not predicated on Phaser or anyone else coming up with a new type of technology. It's based on the tracking antennas, but we do see upside in the sense that if you want to interconnect for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or something of any country, you want to link up all their embassies with high throughput links. In downtown Paris, you're probably not going to be allowed to put 2 or 3 big tracking antennas of a few meters diameter on the roof. But a phased array antenna, sure, why not, if you paint it the right color.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are many market extension opportunities we see that will drive new possibilities and new markets, new applications for us once it becomes available, which will be great. But for now, we can function with what is available.
Okay.
One, a commercial message. The discussion of satellite terrestrial ground systems is actually a panel this Wednesday. So to a certain degree, if those of you are interested in a more detailed answer, that panel is right around 9:30. O3B is on it, we're on it, BridgeSat's on it, and Kratos is on it. But as to laser light, we're 96, 97% COTS, but when it comes to the ground system, particularly the ground node, as we call it, the ground node is really where most of our NRE and our R&D is going. It's not different than at TerraStar, my last company. We spent $60 to $80 million on a single handset so that we could get it right. So when the satellite was actually up, we could communicate with something that was market and ready to go. The ground nodes are are unique. They're being built for us by L3Coms. Those of you who may have missed it, this is an all-optical system. So the ground nodes are composed of 3 laser heads, all pointing at the horizon through a slit. And those 3 laser heads will track the satellites as they go across the horizon. So it is somewhat something commercial off the shelf, but it's also something brand new. They weigh about 500 pounds. You put them on top of a building. You drop down through the roof into the customer equipment room, and it delivers an all-optical signal. So those ground nodes are really the thing that the customer interacts with. That's the one the customer will actually see. They don't see the satellites. And so in a sense, your point earlier was the hard part is the satellites. Yeah, but the real money goes to where the customer interacts with the network. And that happens to be, for us, the ground node. They're highly portable. We can install them, assuming regulatory allows us to install them. And if someone has an event, we can install them, make connectivity, use it for that purpose. If they want to move it, you can't move fiber. You can't create a new route, but you can disinstall that ground node and take it someplace else, put it on another roof, and reinstall it, and you've got another virtual link.
Okay, shifting gears as we don't have a ton of time, I want to go back to you, Mark, for a second on applications. And you signed a deal in the high-frequency trading market not too long ago. It gets to this proposition of you can actually quantify the value of having low latency. And I'm curious as to that market and where you both see. I mean, latency is the big debated topic of relevance. Is it just a lot of cheap bandwidth? And that's one where you can actually really nail it and say, I can do this route cheaper via satellite, a mesh satellite system versus cable. What homework have you guys, both of you, done sort of in the applications area around latency and where you're going to see that play most?
Well, people in this industry simplistically think about latency only in terms of residential broadband, and it's not really relevant for video streaming to households. If you're prepared to let it buffer for a little while, then it's seamless. And I think it was Rodolphe Belmer, the CEO of Eutelsat, once at a conference said famously that it's only relevant for gamers. Well, I don't know if he's talked to many enterprises or data network managers because the amount of data you can pump over a link is exponentially driven by the amount of latency in the system. So latency drives more things than just getting from A to Z. It dictates the throughput, one. Two, I think one of the previous speakers was talking about 5G. 5G requires very fast backhaul, faster than what geosatellites can do today. So their NGSO comes in. High-frequency traders is a minuscule market in terms of throughput, but people are pretty price insensitive because they can quantify the upside to them of that low latency. So there we can play. Generals or other people flying drones on the other side of the planet, they want video in as close as possible to real time. And if it has to go up and down over a geo-link, you're talking half a second to more, end-to-end latency. That is important. These people need the data as quickly as possible. So there are many reasons why latency is important in our enterprise markets. Maybe much less so in residential markets. I don't really have an opinion about that. But for my markets, this is important.
Okay.
It's important in our market, too. I spent 2015 and part of 2016 listening to both international wholesale transport providers as well as those who were dealing with distribution in the wide area networks or in the LANs. And ironically, stating the obvious here to everybody, there's latency and then there's latency. Between what measured 2 points? Is it between the point of origination of the data and the point of delivery? Is it from the point of aggregation, like a data center, to a point of disaggregation? Where's your ping test run? You're going to run it from Singapore, but where? To New York, but where? Even the high-speed trading, when you run on one of the networks from New York trading desk to Chicago trading desk, there's a measure of latency, but it's from Newark to Cicero. And so what's the latency from Cicero to the trading desk? What's the latency from the trading desk to Newark? So when you really get into the latency discussion, the first thing you really have to understand is from where to where you want it measured. Because there are a lot of trades when you get into, say, a cable head-in. There's potentially trades when you get into other facilities where there's a lot of actors there. We can take, depending on the ground node, we can put it on the roof of a corporate campus or a headquarters, and we can put one on the roof of the corporate campus 20,000 miles away or 20,000 kilometers away, and measure latency from those two ends. Now, the beauty is, as Mark pointed out, is whether it's Paris or it's anywhere else, if you're going from here to here and you're covering this mileage, then you're not touching anybody else's network. So consequently, you don't have what would be a service latency cost, but you do have one going up and you do have one going down. So in explaining this, you've got to get it to an apples and apples comparison. And at least in my experience in the last 6-7 months, latency has not been a determinant as to whether somebody wants to buy the service or doesn't want to buy the service. The determinant has really been along the lines of other things like security.
Okay. We're just a few minutes out, so I want to touch one quick issue, which is the regulatory environment. We've seen an operator in Asia, a geo operator, be very vocal about their opposition to LEO constellations, and one in particular about the potential interference it's going to cause as they roam over the equator. Regulation, that's a big deal. Just getting rights to put it in orbit, but actually coordination and then landing signals. Mark, you're RF, but Bob, you are optical. Very different environment. Some would say less strenuous as it currently exists.
Yes.
Mark, first, does that concern you, the battles that you're going to fight on the regular? And then, of course, if you're serving X number of countries, are you going to get landing rights in each of those? What does that keep you up at night, the regulatory side of things?
The thing that, if anything worries me, it's a weird one because our system doesn't require gateways. Yeah, we can function with 1 or 2 gateways globally because most of our traffic will be point-to-point in data networks for large enterprises and government agencies and so on. There'll be precious little internet traffic. For us, that's like a byproduct. Maybe 10% of our traffic will be terminated in a gateway. And because of our intersatellite links, again, where the traffic originates doesn't have to see directly the gateway because you can hop across the network to a satellite that does. Certain countries, in order to get landing rights, require you to have a gateway. And so we'll probably have to commit to building gateways in places where we don't really need it because of regulatory reasons. So that's kind of a weird one. Otherwise, in terms of intersatellite interference, we are not worried because, again, of those intersatellite links and the fact that we always have at least 2 and often 3, 4, 5, 6 satellites in view of any point on the globe. If one satellite is getting close to becoming a possible source of interference to someone else, then we just reroute the traffic over another satellite. So we can do that in a very planned way. Our network is completely planned. There's no dynamic routing on our satellites. Every route is pre-planned, and so we know where every satellite will be relative to serving its customers at any point in time. And so we just make sure things happen smoothly without interfering. And I have had, so far, no piercing questions or acidic remarks or whatever from anyone, including the person you're referring to.
Okay, we'll take that offline. But Bob, do you have your job seems like it's a lot easier maybe on this front, or?
Oh, sure.
Sure, it's a done deal, right?
Yeah. We've got a comfort letter. First of all, Chris is right. Optical, we're up at 196.5 terahertz. There's nobody up there. That's on the edge of ultraviolet light. We operate at 1550 nanometers, which is basically the same operating wavelength that you have in fiber optics and the fiber industry. So from a regulator standpoint, they've made the creative decision, which we strongly support, that since the ITU doesn't have authority to basically regulate or coordinate above, I think it's 400 gigs, something like that, and since it's not on the work agenda, we're unlicensed. I will give Craig McCaw a shout out here because McCaw's the one who filed at the FCC in the 90s for a constellation called Teledesic, and he asked for a license for optical intersatellite links and optical up and down links, and the FCC in a rule and order said, doesn't apply to you, we don't license that, and we encourage you to build it because it moves a lot of pressure off the scarce RF front over to optical for large bandwidth transmission. They have not changed their opinion at the FCC, and we have a comfort letter at Ofcom, which is our launching state, the UK, which has given us the same reinforcement. I will say we do have a regulatory environment. Lasers are still, you have to deal with eye safety, meaning airline pilots, to make sure that you're not creating any kind of interference or causing any kind of harm to both pilots and birds and low-flying helicopters and things like that. The FAA has a standard. All the optical players I know what those standards are and are below them. We also have a laser clearinghouse here in the United States, which the government runs, to make sure that if you're up here and they have laser communications below or optical comms below, that you don't interfere with them, and there's a process to resolve that. So easy, yeah. But
easier.
The lack of rules make complying with the rules a lot easier. But I will tell you, taking a page out of the situation that the RF guys have, and that is, that you guys can take this offline, but the motivation behind a geo complaining about too many LEOs is not about interference. There's a thing called guard bands that you can resolve that with. Mm-hmm. The complaint is competition, and not for the customer per se, it's competition for the spectrum.
Which is a much bigger issue to
issue.
Debate, definitely offline. We're out of time. Last quick question. Operational date for both of you, for those that are considering, if you could give a horizon for when we'll see this actually launching and active, in best case scenario.
We're planning to start launching in 2020 with a view of getting everything up as quickly as possible. That should take somewhere north of 18 months. So late 21, maybe slips into 22, we'll have the full constellation.
Okay.
30 months from January the 1st this year, be delivered to what would be this launch company, in place and operational of the first 4 satellites by the end of 2019. The rest of the constellation fully deployed in 2020.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've come to our end. We're getting the hook. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Please join me in thanking our speakers.